This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Uncommonly Remarkable. Today's special guest is a co-founder of Shibumi, the company that revolutionized shade at the beach and instantly antiquated traditional beach umbrellas and tents. He describes himself as hardworking, persistent, curious, and caring. Expect today to learn about the development of an idea, the creation of a product, and the building of a brand, and much, much more. Everyone, please welcome my friend, Dane Barnes, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. This has been a long time coming.
Yes, it has.
It's very interesting because I don't know if people know the name Shibumi, but I think it's hard to find a person who hasn't actually seen one of these shades on the beach, right? And so we've got to talk about the idea. We've got to talk about the company. We got to talk about how all of these things started. But as we go through some of this, I also want to back up and talk about some of the life before, because I had the opportunity to know you way back when, before this was actually the thing, right? And so we want to talk about a little bit about some of that. So,
absolutely.
So first, let's talk about the idea. So you're going to the beach. You are dealing with normal umbrellas, tents, those types of things. And you said, no, I can't do this anymore. There has to be a better way. Is that how this came about?
That's right. So my family vacations were always 1 week at the beach with grandparents, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And it was my favorite week every year. And at that time, we used traditional beach umbrellas. And then fast forward, my parents bought a home at the beach. And so my brother Scott and I knew that we would be going a lot more often. And we were really not satisfied with the available shade options at the beach, which were the traditional beach umbrellas that everyone knows, the one pole with the circular canopy, and tailgate tents. They have 4 legs and kind of look like a pyramid at the top. And so we weren't satisfied with those. And so we decided to put our minds to it and see if we could come up with something better, along with my best friend, Alex. And so the 3 of us, my brother Scott, best friend Alex, and I started Shibumi back in 2016.
And so how did you start thinking about making it better? Because there's a lot of things that I think we look at and we go, man, that's not quite what I want, but you kind of settle for it. You don't necessarily look to improve it. Mm-hmm. So what were your parameters, or what were you thinking as a way to make it better?
So we were trying to work with the wind, not against it. Traditional umbrellas and tailgate tents tend to blow down the beach because their canopies are rigid. And so we were inspired by lots of things. My grandparents, for example, would hang a sheet on the clothesline, and I remember it floating on the breeze. We were inspired by kites. In particular, my mom loves to fly kites at the beach. That's a childhood memory of mine, that she would always fly a kite at the beach. And I'm not sure what they're called, the windsurfing or kite surfing, where it's kind of the parabola-shaped thing. So, even seagulls just kind of flying effortlessly down the beach on the ocean breeze, that we had that idea, and then we taught ourselves how to sew and made the first prototype, and turned out to really work, and we just kept going from there.
So you taught yourself how to sew?
Yes.
How did that go?
So a friend heard us talking about the idea and actually bought us a sewing machine and the sewing supplies and brought it over and said, you guys get to work. And so Alex and I, unboxed the sewing machine, read the instruction manual, and could not figure out how to thread the sewing machine, even with the instructions and, a YouTube video. And I was ready to quit. But Alex said, no, we'll get it. And so eventually he was the one who figured out how to get this thing threaded. And then from there, we made some pretty bad stitches, but, started to dial it in a little more. And, then we could sew a serviceable stitch line, I guess.
So describe, though, a little bit more about the way the prototype looked, right? Because I love thinking about the imagery of the idea, right? The sheet on the clothesline is a really good image to think about.
Right.
But you talked about the rigid frame in the tailgate tent and how it blows, but you still have to have some sort of frame work in order for this to work, right?
Yep, absolutely. So a Shibumi shade is a wind-powered beach shade. So it is made of a single arch from an aluminum camping tent pole, essentially. That's specifically designed for the beach. And then there is a parachute-like material that is attached. It's rectangular, but it is attached on only one side of the rectangle to that arch. And so it's free flowing on the other three sides of the canopy. And so it just floats on the ocean breeze to kind of give people a feel for what it looks like.
Yeah. So very much like the way you described a kite that would be floating in the wind, or the sheet that's blowing. It's attached in one dimension, but then the wind carries it away from the beach and blows, and that holds it up, and then you have your shade.
That's right.
We've talked a little bit before about it's great that the wind blows off the ocean almost all the time, but it doesn't always, right?
No.
And so this is one of those things that for most people on most days they go to the beach, this is going to be phenomenal. On the odd occasions when the wind's not blowing from the ocean, it doesn't work quite the same. Is that right?
That's right. So the way that the physics of the ocean work is that in the summertime, the land and the sand and the roads, et cetera, heat up much faster than the water does. And so hot air rises above the land, floats out over the ocean water, which is cooler, and the air falls. And that creates this circular, sea breeze where it's almost always, first of all, wind, and second of all, blowing from the ocean to the land. And, 9 out of 10 days or more, that is the case. And so it works great. And then 1 out of 10 or fewer times you get some wonky winds. And so it doesn't work as well in those cases. But, predominantly it is the best, beach shade you can have, in our opinion. And lots of customers say that it's the best money they've ever spent on anything.
So when was the prototype first designed and tested?
So we launched in 2016.
Was all of the development work in 2016, or did you start looking or developing prototypes prior to that?
Yeah, I think really late in 2015 or early 2016. And then, we set up the first one on the beach and people were interested in it. And so we then began selling it to folks who would walk up to us on the beach and ask if they could purchase one.
How did you decide, or when did you know that you had created something that really other people were going to want, not just family and friends and maybe the occasional person on the beach?
I think it was two things. I think the first time that we set the prototype up on the beach, it was a wow to me. And I knew that we had something great, but I never believed that it would become to the scale of what Shibumi Shade is today. But I think when people were walking up to us left and right on the beach to say, what is this? Where did you get it? And we told them we made them. And so we started taking orders from there. That, again, it got us excited enough to pursue this as a business idea, because originally we were just doing it for ourselves.
Right.
We never planned to sell any, but we got confidence through people coming up and asking about it. And we just decided to keep going.
So you went from one prototype, one beach, maybe a few people buying this thing, to how many beaches today are we seeing these shades?
Over 800.
Wow. And so the part that's remarkable is that a lot of this work is really grassroots, and you guys did the manufacturing, the design work, you did a lot of the marketing work, you went out and found people to sell it in their stores.
Right.
Talk a little bit about like the transition from, this is a really cool project, we like it, a few people like it, to, you know what, we're going to make this a global phenomenon.
I don't know that we ever planned to make it a global phenomenon. It just happened, and we were really fortunate. But for us, in the beginning, we sewed every Shibumi shade ourselves in that first year of 2016. and we were selling them to people hand to hand on the beach that would walk up and ask us to make them one. And so we really wanted to make a product that was really high quality as best as we could do, sewing them ourselves. And so we wanted to stand behind the product and make sure that folks would have a good experience with it. Then from that point, when we had full-time jobs, Scott, Alex, and I, and so we would come home from work at 5:30 and sew until midnight or 1 a.m. every night, and we were burning the candle at both ends, and we realized that was not sustainable. And so then in 2017 and 18 and beyond, we found sewing facilities at first in North Carolina. Then we also added some in Virginia, which we can talk about. And that was really important for us as well.
I think that's one of the things that as people are thinking about growing a business, there are breakpoints, right? One of the things that you mentioned is that you had a big focus on customer service, which you still do.
Right.
But I remember you taking everything from a customer service standpoint extremely personally to make sure that people were getting the experience that they expected to get, and then going beyond their expectations, right?
Absolutely.
And there is somewhat of a limit to how much of that you can do, and the scale becomes much more difficult when you go beyond making 10 or 15 of these things to making hundreds of thousands, right? So it's interesting to think about your break points, right? The difference between we're going to hand sew these ourselves to now we're going to get a sewing facility to now we're going to get multiple sewing facilities.
Right.
That timeline, how long did it take to go from we've got a sewing facility in North Carolina to, this is still not enough, we're going to have to get another sewing facility?
Just about every year. We would always say that every year we do everything differently, not necessarily by design, but just because of the growth that we had to keep up. So, in 2016, we sewed them ourselves. In 2017, we had a sewing facility in Raleigh to sew them for us, but we outgrew them in 2017. Then in 2018, we added another much larger sewing facility in North Carolina. And then seems like every year or two after that, we added another facility. But same thing, going back to the customer service, one thing that was super important to us was to really try to deliver A+ customer service and break down the barrier between the customer and the company, so to speak. And so one thing that I'm really proud of that we did is that Scott, Alex, or I personally called the first 7,000 customers and said, for example, "Hey artists, I'm Dane, I'm the co-founder of Shibumi. Thank you so much for your order. I'm curious how you heard about us. Which beach do you visit? And, by the way, this is my personal cell phone. So if you need anything, please feel free to call or text me." And we would also send a text message to those first 7,000 folks. Then we reached a breaking point. There were so many orders in a day that we just couldn't call everyone. So then we switched to only texting folks. And so we texted the first 20,000 customers, giving them our personal cell phones. And I think that really paid dividends for us by making people feel, emotionally invested in us and the story and feeling that personal connection, which I think helped us to some good degree.
That's also taking a risk, right? Because if you've got 7,000 people that you're personally calling, you've got 20,000 that you're sending text messages to from personal numbers, right? Like you get the good and the bad when you do that. And then now everybody knows, hey, this is a co-founder. I've got all of their information. I'm gonna bug them. I'm gonna ask them questions. I'm gonna get them to do product improvement. What was your plan? Did you think about those types of things?
We wondered what it would be like for so many people to have our phone numbers, but I think that was a pretty minor concern. That I think we were much more focused on really getting to know the folks who were buying our product. And really wanting to have that relationship with them. And I'll never forget it. People were just so excited to get that phone call and they couldn't believe it. And it was just a really, really neat experience for them that just gave me a lot of juice to keep going. And I wanted to have more of those interactions. So to me, it wasn't a burden. To me, it gave me a lot of life. And excitement to keep going.
Well, and that's something interesting to think about too, because if you go out and buy a product, you don't necessarily know at the time that you purchase it how big the company is, right? You know that you've gotten a product that you needed, you wanted, it's going to really do well for you, but you don't know is this a product that was made by a nobody somewhere in a
Right.
far, far away place? Did someone's grandmother sew this for me? Like,
Hmm.
you just don't know,
Or is it a
right?
huge company, or you just have no idea
That's
in a
right.
lot of cases.
And so you don't have any expectation that you're going to hear
Hmm.
from the owners of the company at all.
Hmm.
And so I would imagine that people were really excited and a little bit surprised that they
Hmm.
would hear directly from you. And obviously it worked out very well to have done that. So
Hmm.
kudos for coming up with that idea.
Thank you.
You mentioned that all three of you guys had full-time jobs.
Hmm.
And so let's talk about that for a bit, right? Because you were working in a different industry.
Hmm.
You were doing what most of us do, right? You graduate from college, you think about your long-term career, you invest in employment, and then you start to develop that career,
Hmm.
and then you decided that I'm going to make a break and I'm going to go this way. Let's talk a little bit though about what you were doing before,
Hmm.
because I actually think you were really interested in and really loved some of the things that you were doing.
Hmm. So before, I started out as a business analyst for a regional optometry firm, and that's where you and I met, and I really loved that work. And then that transition to working with the same group of people at the optometry firm, but launching a pre-employment assessment company to help businesses improve their hiring decisions. And so, I think I learned a lot. I did that for 10 years. I think I learned a lot from that, and really gained valuable skills. And so I'm grateful for that experience.
What were some of the takeaways that maybe you brought with you to Shibumi?
Hmm. I think the number one, or maybe two things that stick with me is, in that role, it was a really small company. And so I had to do everything. There were very few employees. For a long time, it was just me as the sole employee. And so having to have some of that drive or initiative and willingness to do anything and everything was very important. And so I worked independently in that role. And so I just think that was something major that I took away, of just like a get it done attitude. And the
Mhm.
second thing was, a big part of my job was sales. And so on the phone, businesses would reach out to us to ask for more information and see, consider this solution to help improve their hiring decisions. And so I found myself all day long talking to executives, business owners, doctors, you name it. And I'm young. I'm 22, 23, 24 years old. And these people are significantly more senior and more qualified at everything than I am.
Mhm.
But what I realized was, I certainly wasn't an expert at pre-employment assessments, but I knew more than they did. And so I realized then that I had a confidence to be able to talk to anyone, no matter what their job title is. They're someone just like me. And so I gained a lot of confidence to be able to have that conversation. And so then transferring that to Shibumi, in a startup, you really need that get it done, figure it out attitude. And then especially with sales and those early phone calls to customers, just being, comfortable and excited to have conversations with folks either out on the beach or on the phone, I think really helped me feel comfortable in the Shibumi, transition.
That confidence is a big deal.
It is.
And you really can't develop a product or a company from scratch if you're not really willing to take the risk of talking to people, and then being able to describe and interest people in whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? And so I think you're spot on with being the only employee gives you some sort of drive that maybe most people don't have, but then building that confidence to be able to talk to anybody about your subject matter is also really important.
Mm-hmm.
But you also, if I remember right, you were also coached or mentored in the in between too, right? Like you were doing some basketball coaching, and I feel like that also is one of those things where you got to be confident and willing to go out and speak to individuals and get
Mm-hmm.
them motivated as well, right?
Yeah, I love that. For 6 or 7 years, I think maybe 7 years, I volunteered at Broughton High School, the downtown high school here in Raleigh, with their varsity men's basketball team, and teaching them to lift weights and just all of that stuff, keeping the book at games. And those relationships with those coaches and players is one of my favorite things that I've ever done. And so I really valued that experience, so much, just to try to like build community in Raleigh, where I was new, after I graduated from Chapel Hill and moved to Raleigh. That was a really great way for me to, build community here.
And that just really, it played on some of the strengths that you already had, right? You and Scott both, Scott being your younger brother, both athletic guys. And so this was one of those things that kind of let you take some of those talents and be able to bring them to other folks. So you were doing the volunteer coaching. You were then moving through the original or the early company, and helping with people with hiring decisions. You are now thinking more in advance around, I love this thing I do with my family. I don't love not having the right shade at the beach. I'm going to develop this product. And so now the business is growing. So what roles were you, Scott, playing as the business was starting to grow?
Yep. So in my role, I was, kind of in the earliest days. Alex and I were sewing them, and Scott too, but I'll skip over that to past the sewing, since that was an early phase. So my main responsibilities were retail. Or wholesale, if you will. So contacting stores, beach shops, hardware stores, you name it, asking them if they wanted to carry our product, and kind of getting our foot in the door there. That was my main responsibility. Scott was our finance and operations. So he was working with the sewing facilities. He was ordering the materials, working with the North Carolina and Virginia sewing facilities to produce them on certain schedules and so forth. And then Alex was our marketing and IT guy. So he was website, Facebook, Instagram, any and all technology stuff. He was our guy and did a great job as well. So those were kind of our main three functional areas. But we also, of course, worked super closely together, especially in the early years.
And then as things really started to take off, you got some interest from other individuals, investors, and other folks who were really interested in what was going on, right?
That's right. Yep, around 2021.
And talk a little bit about that phase. That can be very exciting, can also be kind of daunting, and it can really change the way you think about the company. And what I admire about you guys is it really didn't change your focus, which I think is really important.
Right. So for the first many years, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and maybe 2020, I can't quite recall, but we first of all sold out every year of whatever amount of product we decided to make, that we're going to try to grow X times or X percent, and we're just guessing. It's hard to forecast what demand is going to be like, and so every year we guessed wrong, and demand was higher, and we were really fortunate, but demand was higher than what we guessed, and at the same time we were doing that, we never paid ourselves a dime. Scott, Alex, and I never paid ourselves 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, et cetera. And so every year we would sell everything. We would take all of that money and then reinvest it back into the business to buy more materials and make and grow for the next year. And it wasn't enough money. So we also had to go to a bank and get a line of credit, a kind of ever-growing line of credit every year that, had our name on it. And so then to get to your point, it's almost like we were in Vegas and we were gambling and we were playing blackjack, and we would win the hand and we would push all the chips back in the middle. And the chips started to grow, and we thought, boy, we're taking on a lot of financial risk here. And so it just got to a point where we were uncomfortable with how much financial risk it was for us personally, and that we're growing this business, but what if something happens and we're left with nothing? We didn't want that to be one of the outcomes. And so we then were approached by folks that said, hey, there could be interest from investors here. And so we decided to explore that option. And I'm so grateful that we ended up with our investor who we have today. And I think it's been a great thing for us.
That's the part that people maybe don't think about quite as often, right? Is you see the beginnings of a company and you see the success of the company, but you don't necessarily see that stuff in the middle where the co-founders are really nervous because they've got this great idea. It seems to be doing well. you're trying to guess how much demand you're going to have, and you're trying to make sure you got the product that you're going to sell. You're doing all the right things, but there is a huge financial piece to that because you've got to have enough to pay for the facility that's sewing. You've got to have all of the materials. You've got to pay for the marketing, and you're not paying yourself, right? And
Right.
so the flip side is you're also still working a job,
Right.
trying to make sure that you can make Dane live while you're making the company live, right? And I mean, that's a lot going on, particularly for someone who at that time you're still pretty young to be doing all that work.
Right. It was a lot. We were burning the candle at both ends, and it was really fun, but boy, it was stressful. It was.
So now we have Shibumi on 800 or so beaches.
Right.
How many retailers are carrying the product now?
Over 360 now. So most of our retailers are, along kind of dotting the coastline of the U.S. Because what happens is that folks go to the beach, they discover what a Shibumi shade is, or maybe their umbrella or tailgate tent breaks, and they're there for their day or weekend or week vacation, and they want or need a replacement or a Shibumi shade right then and there, and so they just want to pop in to a local retailer and pick it up, get right back out on the beach, and not wait for shipping. So that's the reason why most of our retailers dot the coastline, but we have since expanded into larger metropolitan areas, big cities, with great retail partners as well.
And what's next?
Yeah, so we're excited about our two things. I think product development is something that we're always interested in, be it the core Shibumi shade product of always trying to make it better, but then also coming out with other products in the outdoor space to make people's outdoor time better as well. I think that, and then just really getting the message out further to more places that Shibumi shades are really highly concentrated in North and South Carolina beaches, but less so in Florida and less so in Texas, et cetera. There's lots of growth there and lots of opportunity, but our goal is to try to make, for example, Florida and Texas beaches look like beaches in the Carolinas. So we're very focused on that.
That's amazing. Have you thought about Shibumi International?
Somewhat. I do think there's beaches all over the world, and I think that's a great opportunity for us when we get ready for that phase. And our thinking right now is that there's just still so much opportunity in the U.S. with so many wonderful beaches, and so we want to bring the story and the product to those families at beaches across the U.S.
And so, if we look at where you are in 2024, right? Alex, Scott, and you all still involved
That's
in
right.
day-to-day. What do your roles look like today?
Yeah, so somewhat similar. I am still the head of retail, wholesale. Wholesale is what we call it now. And Alex is still leading our marketing function. And Scott has transitioned away from finance a bit to product development. So he's working full time on developing new products. So largely the same roles that we had from the very beginning. They've changed here and there slightly, and we've been so fortunate to add to our team to have we have 16 full time employees now across all the different departments, and
Wow.
and I'm so grateful for all of their effort.
And you also brought in some additional leadership with different experience levels into the organization too, right?
That's right. Yeah, one of our 16 full-time employees is our first-time CEO, Tiffany Walden. So first time meaning Shibumi has never had a CEO before, but we really think a lot of her and are super excited to have her on board.
That's incredible. I have to say that Alex does. He must do a tremendous job because I don't do a lot of social media, but I kid you not, maybe every 3 days I will see a Shibumi thing pop up somewhere. And I'm like, I know these people. Why is it showing up on my feed? I've not done anything special to find it. But then maybe I take a second or two too long to look at it because then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to show it to you again.
Right.
And so it does it over and over again. I don't know. I think the first time it really hit me that this was a big deal was seeing some of the photos of the beach, and they all the entire beach, there is nothing but Shibumi.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
And I think you guys did an amazing thing by picking a color
Right.
and sticking with it, because then it's immediately identifiable that these are all the exact same product, and you don't see the sand. You just see the Shibumi,
Blue
and it's
and
all
teal.
just blowing in the wind. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the colors we chose, blue and teal, because we wanted it to fit with the place, meaning the beach. And so the blue and teal represents the deep water and the shallow water, kind of where they meet. If you look at aerial photos of the beach, you see that dark blue and the teal colors. And so we think that it really does fit the place. But it also, to your point, makes it super recognizable that when people see that blue and teal, they know that it's a Shibumi shade. And I think it's powerful, especially to your point, when you just see them lined up for miles and miles on the beach.
Yeah. I will never know what it's like to write a song and be a singer and hear the crowd sing my song, right? But I can only imagine it's got to be very similar for you guys, right? Like to be able to go to a beach or see an aerial shot and it all be your product. It's got to be like hearing the crowd sing your lyrics.
It's surreal to go to the beach and crest over the dune and look left and right, and all you see, are Shibumi shades. And I think that is a really wild experience.
When you're working hard, you're very busy, you're building something that's got to last. Sometimes you lose yourself, right? You don't spend any time to be you. I don't think that you've allowed that to happen. I think you are doing other things that are out there. But that's how I ended up sitting in the seat talking to you, right? Like I've been very busy over a very long period of time, and I really wanted to take some time to do something that was inherently just me, right? And so I know that you are interested in musicals, and you are a big fan of modern art. So are you making time to fit some of that into your day-to-day?
I am. I have much better balance now than I did especially when I was doing 2 full-time jobs, the pre-employment assessment company and Shibumi Shade. But even then, after we transitioned to Scott, Alex, and I transitioned full-time to Shibumi, we were, working 7 days a week at all hours of the day and night. And but I think that's important, to do that, to kind of lay the groundwork for Shibumi to grow. But now, yes, I'm grateful that I have better balance, so I'm trying to use it effectively.
I know that you travel quite a bit, which is exciting. I know that's one of those things that you just love to do. But you got to tell me about musicals, because I have a small list of musicals that I'm familiar with, and maybe I could give you a song or two, but I'm not a huge fan. So when we talked about that, I was actually a little bit surprised, because I've known you for a very long time, and I've never heard you humming a show tune.
Right.
So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So back in 2016, when we were sewing the first Shibumi shades ourselves, we sewed them in Alex's spare bedroom. And while we were sewing for 4, 5, 6 hours a night, late into the night, we would put on Broadway musical soundtracks to pass the time. And so the one that we played the most was Into the Woods. With Meryl Streep. Yes. And it was great. And I just got hooked. I mean, I had seen a few Broadway musicals before that and really enjoyed it, but it was a great way to pass the time. And we just listened to a lot of times on repeat, but we would listen to others. And but I do really enjoy going to musicals and just, generally being a fan of the arts.
So I am familiar with Into the Woods. I actually, that one I really actually do enjoy. Is that high on your list as favorites? Is it the favorite, or do you have a list at all?
I think that is my favorite. I've never seen it live, and I haven't seen the movie either, but listen to the soundtrack a lot. So Into the Woods might be my favorite, just because of the nostalgia and its link to Shibumi in those early days.
Well, we'll definitely have to have a movie night and watch the movie. I actually own that one.
Wow. I'm in.
It's actually really, really good from a movie perspective. And then you are somewhat of an art collector. So Talk a little bit about that.
Budding. I have been inspired by friends who have beautiful art in their home. And I guess even growing up in school in art class, I always loved, Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol, the kind of classics. And so then being inspired, later in life by friends who have beautiful art and beautiful homes, that I just think it makes a space more interesting. And so I love going to museums, be it modern art or other types. And yeah, so I have a few pieces in my house that I think are really fun. So I'm always on the lookout for interesting art.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had the opportunity to stop by your home not long ago, and you're right. You have some pieces that are really interesting. I came back and talked to Kate. I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. Your actually your setup is pretty cool. I really like the way indoors bleeds to outdoors, and then the pieces. And so I'm excited to see where you go next with that.
Thank you.
Dane, I'm very impressed with where you've been and where you're going. I'm excited to see all of the next steps, and you've got my curiosity piqued a little bit about these additional products because I think it is very important to be able to expand the portfolio, and it's exciting because you've got more than one way to grow,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got beaches that are not full yet. You've got the ability to add new products, and you can expand beyond. You can expand really around the globe because it is a universal thing that you need shade at the beach.
Well said. I think that's exactly right. That's certainly what we're hoping for.
Well, we've talked about quite a few things. Is there something that I didn't talk about with you that you think is really important?
I don't think so.
Well, I always say it's never your last chance, and obviously we can have you back. And so maybe in our next phase, we'll bring Scott and Alex, and we'll all sit and chat and remember all the things that we all did together.
That would be really fun.
And talk a little bit about where we're going in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. This is fun.
Dane, I can't thank you enough for coming to sit and talk with me. And thank you all for listening with us, because this is just something that I really enjoy doing. And it gives me an opportunity to learn more about people that I thought I already knew. If you're listening and you enjoyed the show, make sure you like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends so you don't miss any episodes. And until next time, this has been Uncommonly Remarkable.